Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever found yourself wondering why a man who seems deeply drawn to you, who craves you, would remain silent? It's a contradiction that can leave you feeling confused, rejected, or even unworthy. But let me tell you something. Silence is rarely meaningless. In fact, it often reveals more than words ever could. When a man deeply desires a woman but remains silent, it's easy to assume he's playing games or isn't interested. But the truth is often far more complex. Many men battle deep internal struggles, unresolved traumas, insecurities, and fears that make emotional vulnerability incredibly difficult. Craving someone isn't just about attraction. It's about allowing another person into one's emotional world, and that can be terrifying. From an early age, many men are conditioned to suppress their emotions. They are taught to be strong, independent, and self-reliant, to never show weakness or vulnerability. Expressing deep emotions, especially those connected to love and attachment, can feel like exposing an Achilles heel. If a man is craving you but remains silent, it's possible he is waging an internal war, one where his emotions clash with his fears. Consider a man who has been deeply hurt in the past. Perhaps he gave his heart to someone who betrayed him, dismissed him, or made him feel unworthy of love. Even if he has moved on, those scars remain. The moment he begins to crave someone new, those wounds reopen. Instead of embracing his feelings, his instinct might be to retreat, to protect himself from the possibility of history repeating itself. Silence in this case isn't indifference, it's self-preservation. Furthermore, men who struggle with self-worth often feel undeserving of love. If he perceives you as an incredible woman, someone intelligent, beautiful, and emotionally mature, he may wonder whether he truly measures up. He might crave you deeply, but simultaneously believe that he isn't enough. In this scenario, silence isn't about rejection, it's about doubt. He might think, what if she realizes I'm not as great as she thinks I am? What if she gets bored and leaves? What if I let her down? Men also face external pressures, career struggles, financial burdens, family expectations that weigh heavily on their self-perception. If a man is struggling in his personal life, his silence may stem from the feeling that he has nothing to offer. He might think, how can I focus on a relationship when I haven't even figured out my own life? This is particularly true for high-achieving men who tie their self-worth to their ability to succeed. If he's in the middle of career setbacks, dealing with financial instability, or feeling like he hasn't yet arrived at where he wants to be, he may withdraw. His silence isn't about you. It's about his belief that he must be a certain kind of man before he can fully engage in a relationship. Silence can also be a symptom of emotional exhaustion. Some men simply don't have the tools to process their feelings. Instead of expressing their struggles, they shut down. They retreat into themselves, not because they don't care, but because that's the only way they know how to cope. This doesn't mean you should wait around indefinitely for a man to resolve his inner battles. But understanding that his silence isn't necessarily about you can prevent unnecessary heartache. It's not always about a lack of interest sometimes. It's about his inability to confront his own demons. Another significant reason a man who craves you might remain silent is his fear of losing his independence. Many men, especially those who value personal freedom, experience an internal struggle between their desire for connection and their need for autonomy. Throughout history, masculinity has been closely tied to independence. A man is often judged by his ability to stand on his own, make decisions without external influence, and maintain control over his life. Love, while deeply fulfilling, introduces an element of unpredictability. It requires compromise, emotional availability, and sometimes even a shift in priorities. For a man who has built his identity around independence, this can feel threatening. Consider a man who has spent years cultivating his own life, his career, his routines, his sense of purpose. He meets a woman who ignites something in him, and suddenly he's faced with a dilemma. Entering a relationship means adapting. It means considering another person's needs, adjusting schedules, and to some extent surrendering the complete autonomy he once had. Even if he craves the connection, part of him may resist the change. This is especially common in men who have had relationships where they felt suffocated or lost themselves. If he was once with someone who controlled him, drained him emotionally, or made him feel like he had to give up his dreams for the relationship, he may subconsciously associate deep attachment with restriction. His silence in this case is his way of testing his own limits, trying to see if he can maintain his freedom while still wanting you. There's also the fear of emotional dependency. Many men worry that if they allow themselves to fully commit, they will become too emotionally reliant on their partner. They fear the idea of being vulnerable to the point where their happiness is tied to another person. This fear is reinforced by cultural narratives that celebrate the lone wolf, the self-sufficient man who doesn't need anyone. Movies, books, and even societal expectations often paint dependence as weakness. A man who internalizes this message may struggle to balance his craving for you with his need to remain emotionally in control. Real-life example, think of a highly driven entrepreneur or artist. He thrives on his work, his freedom, and his ability to make decisions without external pressure. Suddenly, he meets a woman he deeply desires. Instead of immediately pursuing her, he withdraws, not because he doesn't want her, but because he's afraid of what that desire means. Will he lose focus on his ambitions? Will he become distracted? Will he start making decisions based on emotion rather than logic? Men who fear losing their independence often engage in a push and pull dynamic. They crave closeness, but when they feel it getting too intense, they pull away. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's an internal struggle between two powerful forces, the need for connection and the fear of losing oneself. This fear isn't exclusive to men, but it tends to manifest more intensely in those who have spent years prioritizing independence. For some, silence is a way of maintaining control. If they don't fully engage, they don't have to confront the possibility of change. The irony? The right relationship doesn't strip a man of his independence. It enhances it. But until he realizes that, he may choose silence as a means of preserving the life he has always known. Men have an intrinsic desire to be providers, protectors, and leaders in their relationships. This isn't just a cultural expectation. It's deeply rooted in psychology and biology. A man who truly craves you may still go silent because he feels unprepared or unworthy of fulfilling these roles. His silence isn't rejection, it's hesitation born from self-doubt. For many men, success isn't just about personal achievement, it's about having something valuable to offer. A man who is struggling financially, dealing with career instability, or feeling emotionally unprepared for commitment may withdraw, not because he doesn't care, but because he believes he cannot provide the stability you deserve. Imagine a man who is building his career. He's ambitious, driven, and working hard to establish himself. Suddenly, he meets a woman he deeply desires, but instead of pursuing her fully, he distances himself. Why? Because in his mind, love isn't just about emotions, it's about responsibility. He doesn't want to enter a relationship when he feels like he's still working on himself. This is a common scenario, especially among men who have high expectations for themselves. They don't want to enter a relationship empty-handed. They don't want to feel like a burden. If a man sees you as someone of immense value, he may believe you deserve a version of him that he hasn't yet become. Rather than risk disappointing you, he stays silent. This also applies to emotional provision. A man who craves you might recognize that relationships require emotional availability, patience, and understanding. If he doesn't feel capable of offering these things, whether due to past traumas, personal insecurities, or unresolved issues, he might withdraw. He knows that love demands more than just desire. It demands consistency, effort, and emotional security. There's also the pressure of societal expectations. Many men feel that they must reach a certain level of financial stability or personal achievement before they can commit. If he's not there yet, he may step back, choosing silence over the vulnerability of admitting that he doesn't feel ready. Real life example? Consider a man who grew up in a home where financial struggles created stress. He witnessed the burden that comes with instability, and he vowed never to enter a relationship unless he was absolutely certain he could provide. Now, as an adult, when he meets a woman he craves, those childhood fears resurface. Instead of embracing love, he hesitates, not because he doesn't want her, but because he doesn't want to fail her. Silence is often a test. Whether consciously or subconsciously, some men pull away to see how you respond. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's a way of measuring how much you truly value yourself, how patient you are, and whether you respect his space. Men instinctively admire women who maintain their dignity. If you panic at his silence, chase after him, or beg for his attention, he might see that as a sign of insecurity. On the other hand, if you hold your ground, focus on your own life, and respect his space, he will notice. Testing a woman's value doesn't mean he doubts her worth. It means he's observing how she handles uncertainty. If he's serious about a relationship, he wants to know if you can handle the moments when things aren't perfectly clear. Relationships aren't always smooth. They require patience, trust, and resilience. If a man is considering something long-term, he wants to see if you're the kind of woman who can navigate those moments with grace. Some men test through absence because they want to know if the connection is real. Does she miss me when I'm gone? Will she still respect me if I take time to myself? Can she stand strong on her own, or does she need constant reassurance? These are the questions running through his mind. This can also stem from fear. A man may crave you, but wonder if the feeling is mutual. By going silent, he may be hoping to see if you reach out, if you show concern, or if you let him go without a fight. While this isn't the healthiest approach, it's something many men do when they're unsure about where they stand with you. Imagine two women reacting to a man's silence in different ways. One panics, overanalyzes, and bombards him with texts. The other acknowledges his distance but continues living her life. Which woman will likely maintain his respect? The second one. Not because she doesn't care, but because she understands that her worth isn't dependent on someone else's temporary withdrawal. There's also an unconscious biological factor at play. In nature, things that are easily obtained are often undervalued. People chase what they feel they might lose. If a man is testing your value, he's seeing whether you hold yourself in high regard, whether you let him come to you on his own terms, or whether you compromise yourself for his attention. The key here is balance. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone, but you also don't need to chase someone who is deliberately withholding. If his silence is a test, then the best response is to simply continue being the confident, high-value woman you are. The right man will recognize and appreciate that. One of the most powerful yet unspoken reasons a man may crave you but remain silent is his deep-seated fear of rejection and emotional vulnerability. While society often portrays men as confident and fearless, the truth is that many struggle with self-doubt and the fear of not being enough. When a man desires a woman deeply, he opens himself up to the possibility of being hurt. He might ask himself, what if she doesn't feel the same way? What if she rejects me and I'm left feeling humiliated? What if I put myself out there and she sees my flaws? For many men, rejection isn't just about hearing no, it's about what that no represents. It can feel like a confirmation of every insecurity he has ever had, whether about his looks, his worth, his success, or his ability to provide emotional fulfillment. Consider a man who has been turned down before, perhaps even in a cruel or dismissive way. That experience stays with him. Even if he craves you, he might hesitate, thinking, I can't go through that again. He would rather stay silent than take the risk of putting his heart on the line. This fear is often amplified if he perceives you as someone out of his league. If he sees you as confident, intelligent, beautiful, and independent, he might feel intimidated. Instead of stepping up, he withdraws, thinking, she could have anyone. Why would she choose me? His silence in this case isn't about a lack of desire, it's about feeling unworthy of the connection he longs for. Moreover, vulnerability is difficult for many men because they've been conditioned to believe that showing emotion is a weakness. From childhood, many boys are taught to man up, to suppress their feelings, and to avoid appearing too sensitive. Admitting that he craves you, expressing his longing and attachment, means lowering his defenses. For some, that level of emotional exposure feels dangerous. In relationships, vulnerability is the bridge to deeper connection. But for a man who fears rejection, that bridge can feel unstable. He might think, what if I open up and she doesn't reciprocate? What if she sees me as weak? What if I get hurt? Instead of risking it, he chooses silence as a form of self-protection. Sometimes a man remains silent because he's waiting for a signal from you. He craves you, but he doesn't want to be the only one making an effort. He wants to see if you will meet him halfway, if you will take the first step, or if you even notice his absence. This can be especially true if he has been in situations where he felt like he was the only one doing the chasing. If he has put effort into pursuing women in the past and felt unappreciated, he may hesitate to make the first move again. Instead, he waits, he observes, he wants to know, does she care enough to reach out? Will she show interest, or am I just another option to her? There's also an element of pride at play. Some men fear looking desperate or needy. They don't want to be the one who always texts first, who always initiates conversations, who always puts themselves out there. If he perceives you as someone who has plenty of romantic attention, he may hold back, thinking, if she's interested, she'll let me know. A real-life example of this, imagine a man who meets an incredible woman at an event. They have an amazing conversation, the chemistry is undeniable, and he leaves feeling like he's just met someone special. But instead of messaging her right away, he hesitates. He thinks, if she felt it too, she'll reach out. Days pass and neither person makes a move. What could have been a beautiful connection fades into silence, simply because both were waiting for the other to act first. This dynamic is even more common in today's dating culture, where many people are afraid of looking too eager. The fear of being the one who wants it more leads to a stalemate, two people craving each other, but neither willing to break the silence. But this behavior isn't just about modern dating trends, it's rooted in psychology. People are naturally drawn to those who show appreciation and interest. If a man is unsure about how you feel, he may choose silence until he gets some kind of confirmation that his feelings aren't one-sided. Additionally, men who have been emotionally burned before might be more cautious. If he has been in a situation where he expressed interest and was met with indifference, he may have learned to hold back. His silence in this case is a defense mechanism. He's thinking, if she truly values me, she'll show it. If she doesn't, then I have my answer. However, this creates a paradox. A man who craves you but waits for a sign may never receive one, especially if you're also waiting for him to take the lead. Both people end up in a cycle of silence, not because they don't care, but because they are afraid to expose their emotions first. So what happens next? If a man's silence is rooted in waiting for you to show interest, then even a small gesture, an engaging conversation, a subtle text, or a moment of warmth could be enough to break the cycle. But if he remains silent indefinitely, it's important to ask, is he waiting for a sign, or is he simply unwilling to take emotional risks? When a man craves you but stays silent, it may not be because he is indifferent. It might be because he is testing you. Consciously or subconsciously, some men pull away to see how you react. They want to know whether you will chase, whether you will remain interested, or whether you will quickly move on. This might sound like manipulation, but it's often more about self-protection than game playing. If he has been in relationships where he was the only one making an effort, he might hesitate to be the first to show his hand again. He wants to gauge if you truly value him, or if he is just another option in your life. For some men, this test is rooted in a deep fear of investing in the wrong person. They have learned, often through painful experiences, that love is risky. If they give too much too soon, they might be taken for granted. So instead of diving in, they hold back. They create distance and they watch. Imagine a man who has been in a relationship where he did all the pursuing. He was the one planning dates, sending texts, making an effort. Over time, he noticed that the woman he was with became comfortable, even complacent. She stopped putting in effort, assuming he would always be there. The experience left him questioning, was she ever truly interested, or did she just enjoy being pursued? So now with you, he does something different. He craves you, but instead of chasing, he withdraws slightly. He wants to see if you will notice. Will you reach out? Or will you assume that if he's silent, he's no longer interested? For men who operate this way, silence is not about indifference, it's about observation. They want to know, do you actually care, or are you only interested when I'm actively pursuing you? Will you initiate, or are you just waiting to be chosen? Are you patient, or do you immediately assume the worst? This behavior is particularly common in high-value men, those who have options but want a relationship that feels mutually invested. They are not necessarily looking for a woman to chase them, but they do want to feel like they are wanted and appreciated. Of course, this approach can backfire. If he stays silent for too long, he might come across as uninterested or emotionally unavailable. But to him, this test is about filtering out women who are only drawn to the chase. If you respond with patience and a level-headed approach, you pass his test. If you react with desperation or anger, it confirms his fears that the connection wasn't real. At its core, this is about emotional security. He wants to be with someone who values him for who he is, not just for the thrill of the pursuit. And his silence is his way of figuring that out. Sometimes silence isn't about strategy, fear, or control. Sometimes it's simply about being overwhelmed. When a man craves you deeply, when he feels something intense and unfamiliar, he may not know how to handle it. Many men are not taught how to process strong emotions. They know how to work hard, how to set goals, how to fix problems, but when it comes to love, when it comes to deep emotional attachment, they may feel completely out of their depth. Love, attraction, and deep connection can be incredibly powerful forces. They disrupt a man's sense of stability, they challenge his independence, they make him question things he never thought about before, and for some this is overwhelming. Picture a man who has spent years focusing on his career. He has built a structured, disciplined life. He has routines, goals, and a clear path forward. Then he meets you. Suddenly, emotions flood in, excitement, longing, attachment, even fear. He starts thinking about you when he should be working. He feels a pull toward you that disrupts his usual sense of control. Instead of embracing these feelings, his first instinct is to shut down, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to integrate these emotions into the life he has carefully built. His silence is a way of trying to regain control. For emotionally reserved men, this feeling of overwhelm can be especially paralyzing. They are used to rational thinking, to logic, to solving problems. But emotions aren't problems to be solved. They are experiences to be felt. And for a man who has never learned how to navigate deep emotional waters, silence becomes his default response. Additionally, some men associate strong emotions with loss of power. They fear that if they allow themselves to feel too deeply, they will become vulnerable, too attached, too dependent, too at risk of heartbreak. They might think, if I let myself fully fall for her, what happens if she leaves? Instead of taking the risk, they withdraw. This is why some men disappear after an intense emotional experience. They might spend hours talking with you, opening up, sharing something personal, and then suddenly they go quiet, not because they regret it, but because they don't know what to do with the depth of what they're feeling. There's also the reality of timing. If a man is already dealing with stress, work, family issues, personal struggles, then experiencing deep emotions for someone on top of that can feel like too much. Even if he craves you, even if he sees the potential for something real, he might step back simply because he feels emotionally maxed out. The key takeaway: a man's silence doesn't always mean he doesn't care. Sometimes it means he cares too much and he doesn't know how to handle it. For women who encounter this, the instinct might be to demand answers, to push for clarity, to force him to talk. But often what he needs is space, not to push you away, but to process what he's feeling in a way that makes sense to him. The irony is that the very thing he fears, being overwhelmed by emotion, is what will ultimately lead him to deeper connection if he allows it. But until he reaches that point, his silence may be his only way of coping. The answer is not to chase, not to beg, not to analyze his every move. The answer is to focus on yourself, to recognize your worth, to understand that the right man will not hide behind silence, but will stand in front of you, willing to speak, to fight, to love. So if he craves you but remains silent, ask yourself, is this a silence you want to endure? Or do you deserve a love that speaks clearly, fearlessly, and with unwavering conviction? The truth should not shock you, it should empower you.